Awesome. Great.
And plus.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to wait a few minutes to see if any more people want to join us. So just sit tight, grab a glass of wine, and we're going to get started pretty soon.
Are we muted?
No, but that's a great housekeeping item. I was just about to mention, if you don't have your mics on mute, if you can please mute yourself, that would be great.
Go. All right. There we go.
Already a question. Are we okay to start with any wine? Evan or Lisa, is there one you suggest to get people started?
I think for sure. I think we're going to lead off with the Pinot Gris. So I think that's probably a fine spot to start.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I was right.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. Wine's out of fridge. All right, I'm ready.
I'm ready. Been ready for a while.
There we go. All right.
I'll come and sit over there on the stool.
Oh, okay. Well, you can sit in your chair. You can sit wherever you want.
Here we go.
All right, we'll just give it one more minute and then get settled. If you haven't done so yet, please put your mics on mute and we'll just get going in another minute here. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
All right, I say we get going. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to have Blasted Church Vineyards with Everything Wine to present this virtual tasting. My name is Cindy. I'm the Director of Marketing with Everything Wine. If you don't know Everything Wine, we are BC's largest wine retailer with 6 locations and online. You can shop everythingwine.ca. I will be co-moderating this event with Danielle from Blasted Church Vineyards, who is the Director of Sales. A few housekeeping, just to remind everyone, please put your mic on mute. If you have any questions, please do ask them in the chat. We'll be checking that for all your questions and hope to have some time at the end to get to them. And if you're having any technical issues or anything wonky is going on, please also let us know in the chat so we can try to address that right away for you as well. With that, I'm just going to kick off and get us going. And it's my pleasure to introduce Evan, who is a winemaker with Blasted Church. He has a degree in microbiology from UVic and grape and wine technology, studied grape and wine technology at Brock University, making the winemaker Blasted Church since 2017. And our very own Lisa, who started with us as a wine consultant in 2013 and is now our manager of education. She teaches our WSET programs and educational programs and is currently studying for her Master's of Wine. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Evan to tell us more about Blasted Church.
Yeah. So first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on what is a sunny, beautiful Thursday evening. So yeah, my name's Evan Saunders. I've been the winemaker at Blasted Church since 2017. Viticulturist is John Bailey. He's also actually been with us since 2017. So it's kind of nice. We have the core battery together for the last 5 growing seasons. Our estate vineyard size is about 40 acres. Overall, we have around 70 acres, but 40 of it is planted to the key grape varietals down below. So quite the laundry list of varietals there. And as we'll kind of encounter in a little bit, you'll find quite a few of those do find a home in our Hatfield SKUs actually. And our annual production is about 20,000 up to 28,000 cases, kind of give or take, depending on the growing season. So a couple of smaller ones for the last couple of years. So the original plantings on site were from 1987. So that's a block of Chardonnay Muscat. So globally, not terribly old vines, but as far as the industry in BC goes, we're actually working with some of the older plantings of vinifera in the valley. And recently, a couple of years ago now, we actually received our approval for our sub-GI. So it's the Skaha bench, which is the kind of the eastern side of Skaha Lake, up just based on the elevation. So a bench up above the lake, kind of sandy loam soil. So it's basically characterized by the lake aspect. So the Skaha Lake has an enormous influence on our growing site, and as well as the elevation and the soil. So kind of a unique identifier for our site as we go forward and the industry kind of grows up a little bit. In the vineyard, John has been working on with a kind of regenerative approach. So it's the idea, there's organics and biodynamics and kind of a laundry list of different approaches that people can take in the vineyard. Regenerative kind of takes pieces of all of those and puts it together to try to leave the ecosystem as a whole in a better condition than when you started, basically. So we've, as you see there, our new flock of hens, just joined by a rooster actually quite recently. So we're incorporating them for some kind of pest control. They're great for eating bugs and things that want to eat the grapevines themselves, and for working the soils and all the fertilizer and everything else that they bring to the table.
Awesome. That's really exciting to hear that you and John are working on these great projects. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about the history of Blasted Church to begin.
Yeah, so it's as we're looking at here, version 1.0, and I think Lisa, as we were talking about, this would have been the label that first drew you in, and actually the label that first drew me into wine was this version 1.0 of Hatfield's View. So just I've always loved them, have a soft spot in my heart for these characters. They're they jumped off the shelf when I was in the wine shop as a 21-year-old. They really spoke to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Drinking Hatfield's Fuse was definitely one of those early kind of learning about wine. And yeah, it was one of the ones that really got me into wine, and especially the BC industry. And you're right that they were really groundbreaking labels, quite unique for BC and any wine in general. So, maybe you can give us a sense of when these labels were kind of first introduced.
Yeah, so for these labels, they were like the first iteration. So we're 19 years in now. So these were around 19 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was the winery. It was initially planted by a gentleman whose last name Perpich. It was called Perpich Hills, but then rebranded as Blasted Church when the Campbells took ownership. And kind of the first thing that they really focused on was getting a sort of a very unique name, brand through like the whole messaging, the whimsical labels, the bright, the colorful, and obviously the full wrap labels around the bottle, which is a fairly unique thing. So something that really stood out on the shelf with a unique name, a unique story. So
can you tell us what is the story? Why is it Blasted Church?
Yes. So it's a lot less blasphemous than we're given credit for, I suppose. So it actually takes a true story of kind of local lore. There was a mining town called Fairview, just kind of west of Oliver. The mine went bust, but they had a church there. So it was a ghost town with a church, and then Okanagan Falls was a town without a church. So they decided kind of the best path forward would be to relocate that church from Fairview down to Okanagan Falls, and then to facilitate that by lighting off a few sticks of dynamite hung from the rafters inside the church to loosen the nails to allow them to move the church. So the Blasted Church.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So what happened, I guess, after these labels? Approximately how long were these in circulation for before they got changed? I forget now.
So it's kind of like a seven-year cycle on brand for whatever. It's what our brand guy is. He's that's his number. So that's the number that we've operated on. So we were with the first version for 7 years, and then on to the clay characters, and kind of it ends up being give or take, because putting together any new brand always ends up being a lot more arduous and a lot more pieces to put together than you actually expect when you're going through, particularly with a large portfolio like ours. So then version number 2, the Chris Sickles, the little clay characters, which is always kind of a fun story. So those ones, the storytelling series, so they tell the story of the blasting of the church. So those little characters that used to be on the labels, they actually were like handmade clay characters, and the artist like sewed the tiny little clothes and all the backpacks and everything that they were. I always found that to be the most interesting part about those, was that they were legitimate little sculptures, kind of posed to make the labels.
Awesome. All right, so let's fast forward to today and what's happening at Blasted Church today.
So today, now we are into version 3.0 of the Renaissance series. So it was kind of with John and I coming together, sort of symbolizing the Renaissance in the vineyards, with the regeneration, Renaissance in the cellars, with a different approach to the wines. So it was time to rebrand with the Renaissance series. So the labels that you have on the Pinot Gris, the Hatfield Fuse, and the Big Bang Theory actually all take scenes from around the Lower Mainland, and then there's an artist down in LA who recreates the Renaissance scenes on top of those scenes from around the Lower Mainland. So it's a Renaissance tied into the Lower Mainland, like BC in general. So it's love the story that they tell, the color that they bring. They certainly hop off the bottle at you.
Maybe as we go through the wines, we can look at the details in as we go. Because each one has a really cool story behind it for sure. And also I would like to say, if you guys aren't following them on Instagram, the Renaissance characters on Blasted Church's Instagram are fantastic. I love watching it.
They do a good job. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
really good. Yeah, taking all those Renaissance pieces and putting them into very modern times.
Oh, the portfolio. So we have a pretty large portfolio. It kind of varies, fluctuates year by year. I was kind of, I curse it a little bit, but it is, a lot of it is my doing. Just get excited about small things, little things, and end up wanting to put them into bottle on their own. But our core production now is our Renaissance series of wines. So all 3 wines that we have tonight are from the Renaissance series. So those wines will be very kind of true to the vintage, true to the varietal, true to the blend, very, so my style in particular with these wines is kind of focusing in on that kind of purity and that freshness and that vibrancy. Really food-friendly wines, a lot of them very comfortable on their own as well. So that's always kind of the focus with the Renaissance wines. Then we take the, yeah.
Should we start tasting them?
Yes, I think, yes.
We'll come back to the rest, but I just want to focus on that Renaissance tier.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to start tasting the 2019 Pinot Gris first. So if you haven't already poured and sipped, let's get started with that. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the Pinot Gris as a wine to start.
Yeah, so this one is actually, it's the 2019 Pinot Gris is a Scaha bench wine. So it means 100% of the fruit came from the Scaha bench. About 70% of it came from our estate. We have 2 blocks that we've since microblocked down to 3. And then our neighbors on the Scaha bench as well. So pretty classic, true to the 2019 vintage. It was a cooler year, incredibly challenging. One of those ones where you kind of look, when you're in the middle of it, you're wondering what you're doing, what you decided to do with your life. But really happy with how this wine turned out. Really speaks to the vintage for me, that brightness, that freshness. So in the cellar, we work fairly simply with this wine. Just destem, straight to press, no skin contact. Just really trying to capture that brightness, that freshness, that vibrancy, focusing more on earlier picks, just to kind of maintain that natural acidity, that natural balance, lower alcohol, and kind of sticking with that orchard fruit profile as opposed to pushing a little bit further where you can kind of get into the more of the tropical fruit. Then you're just playing that kind of different style. This is the style that I like for our site, particularly for this vintage.
I love that it definitely is that orchard fruit, the pear, apple, some little bit of peach. It definitely feels like you're in the Okanagan when you're having a sip of this. It's also, you're right, nice and fresh. There's that kind of zippy lemon on the finish, which is nice and refreshing.
Yet this is one of the wines every year where you always you look at the whole package, the label, everything that goes along with it. And this wine, the Pinot Gris, with that label of the fruit, basically the fruit stand, it's matches up incredibly well. It has that beautiful freshness, lightness. It is an incredibly lively wine, very food friendly. So it's kind of exactly what I would have hoped for, I guess, out of the 2019 Pinot Gris.
Awesome. And so can you tell us a little bit about the Pinot Gris label? So what Vancouver scene is shown there?
So this is a fruit stand on Robson.
Yeah, I think
we can kind of, yeah.
There we go. You can see the fruit a little bit better there. Awesome.
And then, the angels recreated on top of that. So it's not like a Photoshop thing, or there is an artist who actually recreates the images on top of the background.
So our recommendation was from was for Gruyere for this wine, I believe. So I'm going to have taste of Gruyere with the Pinot Gris. if you're like me on the North Shore, you went to Puccini's, with great little deli. They have a fantastic selection. I bought some for tonight and a few other options for later. I love the crystal salty Gruyere. It really kind of brings out that fruity character in the Pinot Gris. Yeah. So you mentioned Skaha Bench. So is this your first single GI from Skaha Bench that you've made?
Yeah, so it's
yeah.
It had been previously, but we hadn't been able to, or we had other wines that would have qualified, but didn't have the legal ability to put it on a label until that time. So the 2019 Pinot Gris was between that and the Gewurz were the first two wines on the market with that actual sub-GI label on them, which is, as I was saying, it kind of might seem like a somewhat trivial thing, but it is, for me, incredibly important. It tells the story of exactly where that fruit comes from, the exact conditions, that elevation above the lake effect, the even down to the soils, that sandy, loamy, silty kind of profile. So I think going forward, it's a lot of fun to be able to compare what a Pinot Gris from the Skaha Bench is versus what a Pinot Gris from the Similkameen is going to be, or a Pinot Gris from Golden Mile. So it's a great thing, a great tool for our industry going forward to tell our stories.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time in BC, having these very specific regions nailed down and showing expressions very different. So you mentioned Pinot Gris and Gewürztraminer. Those are the two in your portfolio right now that are under the Skaha Bench.
We have quite a few, most of our whites actually. So our unorthodox Chardonnay, it's the Chardonnay Muscat, just all stainless. Definitely that Chardonnay for the ABC crowd. So we have quite a few working on more. So it's working with John a lot to get the health of our vineyard back to where we want it to be. So we are slowly but surely, we're getting closer with our Merlot. We have some small lot stuff, small lot Cab Sauv that is also off our own site. So Skaha Bench wine, our sparkling wine, our OMG is as well. So it's kind of the work in progress, kind of trying to drive more that way all the time. It's great for that, keeping us honest, actually, to kind of really focus on your own vineyard, because you want that on your label. You want the Skaha Bench on your label.
Absolutely. Yeah, highlight that special place.
Yeah.
Cool. We got a couple kind of mentions about the winemaking, so maybe we can just kind of focus on that for just 1 second. So yes, it is all stainless steel fermentation on this one, so that we get that really nice, pure, fresh fruit, which I think you're tasting in the glass for sure.
Yes, we have before played around with some barrel fermentation on the Pinot Gris. It adds another dimension, but for what I was looking for, especially out of 2019, it was wouldn't have been the path forward for that wine for me, but also something that we'll always playing around. You never know.
Awesome. That's the nice thing about winemaking, is every year is different, right?
It's funny, kind of, you think you figured something out, and then lo and behold, the next year is entirely different.
Awesome. Well, it's nice that you can kind of keep some consistency too with this style and bring that orchard fruit forward each. Awesome. Delicious. And it looks like a lot of people are enjoying it with the Gruyere, suggesting scalloped potatoes with Gruyere. I'm getting hungry. That sounds great.
It is. It's a great, like, that Thanksgiving, Easter wine, turkey, ham. It's quite versatile with that acid, with everything. It's great for those bigger, kind of heavier meals.
Yeah, that nice freshness really cuts through. Yeah, Pinot Gris is such a wonderful, great variety from the Okanagan. It's so nice that it's highlighted on the Skaha Bench, and yeah, Okanagan, so good.
Evan, there was a question that came through a little bit earlier about the heat wave, like we were talking about earlier. Maybe just quickly touch on what the heat can do and how it affects the wines.
Yeah, so certainly we're into what for me is an unprecedented heat wave out here. I've never seen anything like it. We're like mid to upper 30s right now for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. And then next week we'll be into low 440 to low 40s, and then further down south where we do get some fruit from the soy using to forecasting 45 and 46. So it's basically the grapevine just shuts down at around 30 degrees. So it's, you kind of, while hot is good, up to 30 is great. You continue to have that evolution and that ripening process and kind of development of the vines happening. Everything above that, though, you do shut down, and then you lose those hours in the day until the temperature does come back down to 30 degrees. So it's great to have heat, but this much heat will actually set us back, which is not, we're in a pretty good spot this year. We got off to an historically average, maybe earlier than average start. If we have kind of extended pushes of like extreme heat like this, we will slow right down. And it's just hard on everybody working the vineyard as well. It's you're out there basically from first light. So whether that's 4:30 now, maybe 4 o'clock a.m. and then basically you might be able to push through until noon. But outside of that, it's pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. Fingers crossed it's just a short one.
Yes.
And whereabouts are you in the vineyard in terms of kind of the stage of growth? What's happening right now up there?
So we are through flowering now. So we're into fruit set. So the vines are, if you drive into the vineyard, they're pretty full canopy already, almost up to the top wires, past the top wires in certain blocks. So it's a pretty full canopy. The little clusters are just developing now. So through the flowering, we did have a little bit of rain through the flowering process, which usually means not necessarily perfect fruit set, but things are looking pretty good. It's kind of hammering through the stages. So now just those tiny little berries are forming. Grapevines are continuing to grow, kind of shoot thinning and suckering, tucking the shoots up to keep the growth going vertical and kind of stop it from looking like a tangled mess, and to keep the airflow going through to make sure that no disease pressure or anything like that kind of, although with heat like this, there's not a lot that can happen, but just making sure we're on top of that and irrigating.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds like it's really happening up there already.
Mm-hmm.
Full swing.
Yes, it's always amazing. Every year, it amazes me from bud break that we get grapes off of the vine. It's an amazing thing how quickly you progress through just from bud break through to harvesting fruit. It's a pretty amazing thing.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Should we talk about Hatfield's Fuse next?
Let's do it. So our kind of big, fresh, aromatic white blend. This was the wine, as I was saying, that got me into wine actually back with that first version of Hatfield's Fuse. I guess it's probably quite a different style now from then, but still sort of kind of checking that same box. So just made to be sort of really boisterously aromatic, just like basically a fruit salad in a glass. Really, once again, trying to capture that freshness, but also kind of that ripe profile, which we'll kind of get into how we achieve that a little bit more on the winemaking side of things, but just kind of made to deliver sort of vintage in, vintage out, that really big, bold fruit expression.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely very aromatic. A little bit of that floral blossom.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some orchard fruit. But again, on the palate, nice and crisp and refreshing on the finish.
Mm-hmm. It has, so it's Viognier dominant, so you do get that really stone fruit aroma, as you're saying, kind of aromatics, almost like white blossomy profile on the nose, and you get that sort of viscosity through the mid palate that the Viognier brings, but then kind of held in check with all of the other varietals that we sort of work together to kind of naturally maintain that acid and keep the alcohol down, as Viognier can kind of run on you a little bit if you push in the, to that full ripeness. So kind of having the Chardonnay Muscat and the Sem and the on down through the laundry list of kind of the aromatic whites to sort of naturally bring it kind of back in check. It's one of those wines where I think it might get thought of as just sort of just sort of gets kind of thrown together, and this is what it is, but it is a very kind of thoughtful process every vintage in kind of understanding what's typically what goes into Hatfield's Fuse. I mean, we know what blocks, we know from what vineyards typically, even down to what rows of what blocks are generally going into Hatfield's Fuse. So kind of knowing where to push further in one dimension as far as ripeness, and also kind of counteracting that with an earlier pick of something else to sort of keep everything kind of in check and in balance, to give you sort of a balanced finished wine in the glass without having to resort to any sort of trickery in the cellar.
Right. So you said that it's changed a little bit. So is that just the grape varieties that are going in, or do you think the style has changed since you took over, or just the evolution of the wine drinkers? And so what has driven that change?
So it's all three of those things. So the grape varietal has changed. I've kind of, when I took over as winemaker, we got rid of some blocks of fruit for some growers that I didn't particularly care for. I didn't really like what they brought, so we got rid of those and have since kind of focused on some other fruit from some different growers and some other fruit from the same growers to bring the profile that I was looking for. I personally like the Viognier dominance. I think it brings that great aromatic profile. Who doesn't like apricots and peaches and white blossoms? And then also looking for earlier picks on a lot of the stuff to keep the acid a little bit higher than it has been historically. And also with that, being able to get it into bottle with there's a little bit of residual on it, but not a whole lot so to get it there dry, still technically dry, trying to kind of, I don't know, I think it's probably the way the consumer, the palate has moved in that direction. I think is a great direction to move into, is that more palate cleansing, brightness, freshness, without that kind of heavier profile.
Yeah, it definitely has. I think you're right that people are kind of looking for a little bit something more fresher, crisper, but this does have just that hint of sweetness that does kind of add a little bit of texture to the palate, makes it very pleasing, easy to drink style, which is what Hatfield's Fuse, I think, has been known for this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hear the story of why it's called Hatfield's Fuse.
Yes, it's an Okanagan legend, Harley Hatfield. It's funny, when you kind of get into it, the number of people who have a Harley Hatfield story is quite amazing. So he was the engineer who decided to try lighting the sticks of dynamite hung from the rafters of the church. So it was his idea. So hence Hatfield's Fuse. It was Hatfield's Fuse to loosen the pegs that held together the church. They did blow off the steeple. That was the only, the only loss to it was this. So the church is they succeeded in moving it. It still stands in Okanagan Falls, if they call it the Blasted Church. So it still functions as a church to this day, actually. So Harley Hatfield was the man with the plan.
Awesome. And how about the what's on the label on this one?
So this one is a car wash up in North Van. So I think it actually in actual life it does say wax wash polish across the top. But to avoid confusion with the wax wash Polish, for whatever reason, that it was a thing. It has been changed. So if you've seen that that car wash, it's a little bit different now on the label, just to keep our lives a little bit easier, to not have to answer what that wine has to do with Poland. And then obviously the Renaissance character recreated on top of that. And it is, as you'll see on the label, it says Okanagan Valley. So that wine, not a Skaha bench product, although it does work in a lot of fruit off of our own vineyard, but from the Okanagan.
Yeah, if any of you have been on the North Shore and been to our store, it's just down the road from there. I didn't even realize that this one was on there, and I drive past it every day on my way to work. It's the Oasis car wash. So I thought that was pretty cool to bring those kind of moments together. So I'm going to test it with a little bit of the goat cheese. I picked up some fresh chèvre and just see how that works with the fresh Hatfields. I chose that soft goat cheese. I love the texture, and I think the freshness of the Hatfields goes really well with it. That kind of apricot, floral blossom is enough intensity that it kind of matches up that intensity of the goat cheese as well.
It's Viognier and goat cheese. They just work. It's one of those things.
Absolutely. Very delicious.
Yeah. There it is. A very easygoing, very likable, especially going into a heat wave like this. Yeah, great wine for summer.
Yeah, and great to have this kind of iconic wine continue along in Blasted Church profile or portfolio, maintaining that very floral, crisp, refreshing style. All right. Moving on to our last wine, the Big Bang Theory, our red blend. Ooh, smells good.
It is, that's another wine kind of always working towards something. So kind of the red program's answer to Hatfield's Fuse. So this is it's the on vintage release. So we'll be rolling into the 2020. This year we'll be bottling it in the next couple of months. So it is just really that purity of fruit, all about kind of the fruit being first and foremost. It does have a bit of that sort of savory character, that gaminess that comes from a grape called Lemberger, which also known as Blaufränkisch, which is now our new rosé. But yeah, Merlot dominant. I've kind of tried to keep it that way since I've taken over, and little bits of Petit Verdot. This wine actually had a little bit of 2018 blended into it, which we are allowed to under VQA. We're allowed about 15%, just to sort of flesh out the profile of the wine a little bit, kind of bring an extra layer of texture, but while still kind of allowing that, red berries, blueberries, and plumminess to shine.
It definitely has that very juicy, ripe aroma and flavors, some kind of cherry, raspberry, really nice and juicy and smooth. And you can see that Petit Verdot gets maybe a little bit of that color and oomph in the background, but otherwise just very fresh and fruit forward style.
It kind of brought that, that little bit more of the tannin structure, sort of amplified that a little bit, just to allow it to match up to a little bit more. For me, this is always kind of a classic barbecue wine. Burgers off the grill, sausages, pizzas, whatever it might be. For me, this wine always shows up quite well.
Yeah, this is a crowd pleaser, very smooth and fruity. I actually chilled it down a little bit before our chat. It's very warm in here, but also I love that a little kind of freshness that comes out when you just pop it in the fridge a few minutes before.
I did the same thing. You can tell a heat wave is upon us. Everybody's chilling their reds. And
Yeah, right. But this is it. That's a great kind of tip for barbecue season. It really kind of brings out that freshness, and we don't always want to drink reds in the summer, but this is one that you certainly can drink in the summer. It stands up to your big barbecue fare, but then kind of gives you that kind of mouth-watering sensation still.
Yeah, it's for me, it kind of that same thing as the Hatfields. It really checks a lot of those boxes, especially for the warmer weather drinking. Something on the patio, whether you're having food or whether you're preparing food, whatever it might be. It really is quite a versatile wine, kind of profile wise. Just kind of lets you do a lot, which is always nice.
Yeah, and I absolutely love this label. This is so Vancouver. I think it's not very hard to tell what the background is here, right?
Oh, Rogers Arena.
Yeah.
For
Awesome.
GM Place for a certain crowd. Depends on who you want.
I've definitely referred to it as GM Place often. I think that will take a while to change. Yeah, I mean, too bad that our team isn't in the playoffs, but maybe one day we can celebrate with a bottle of this wine. It's such a true statement. Hockey is religion in BC, absolutely.
Yeah, and then coming from the prairies, that slogan speaks to me as well.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna have a little taste with. I picked up some aged Canadian cheddar for my pairing today. What I like about the aged cheddar is it has a little bit of that savory quality to it, and the fruitiness of the Big Bang Theory is a really nice kind of balance of the two. You get that really intense savory aged cheddar and then that fruity juicy quality of the Big Bang. Is there a story behind the Big Bang Theory beyond the religious or the scientific context?
So it'd be the double entendre one. So the Big Bang Theory being the Big Bang in the church that loosened the pegs, and then also obviously the Big Bang Theory, which is nothing to do with the show. That's one classic misconception that we deal with all the time at tastings of why we haven't been sued from the creators of that show. But yeah, just speaking to Harley Hatfield's sticks of dynamite in the Big Bang Theory. And as far as winemaking side of things, once again, it's Okanagan Valley wine. So we combine fruit from our estate with some fruit down through all of Vernasoyus. Everything held separately, harvested separately. It's kind of optimal balance of ripeness and acid, and then brought into the cellar, and all the wines are held separate until blending season. So that's typically anywhere from kind of December through January and February, where we taste through everything, put together the blend. Whereas with this wine, we decided to put in a little bit of the 2018 vintage just to give it that extra character that I was speaking about. And then winemaking wise, we do keep things fairly simple through the Renaissance series in particular. It's really kind of classic, straightforward, kind of start to finish, no weird tricks or anything too funky going on in the cellar.
And for the blend, Merlot is predominantly the kind of the dominant grape variety, and then you tweak the other ones here and there to give you that style. Is that how it typically works?
Yeah. So Merlot for me, so it's funny, we have Pinot Gris and Merlot in this, or Big Bang with and Merlot there in the tasting, and those are two grapes that I can never wrap my head around, but just get the short end of the stick all the time in any conversation. I think Sideways did Merlot in a little bit, but still slowly recovering from that. But something for me that the Okanagan does incredibly well. It's,
Absolutely.
it's an easier grape to grow. It ripens beautifully in our climate. It loves our soils. Anything, from down Osoyoos up through, even up to Summerland, even warmer spots on the Naramata Bench where Merlot can do incredibly well. So it's something that I personally like drinking, like making. So happy to focus on, as opposed to going with something a little more temperamental for the climate. Looking for a pretty consistent style, always understanding that vintage will have a huge impact on what that style is, but always shooting for kind of a similar idea year in, year out for Hatfields and Big Bang in particular, trying to not deviate too much one way or the other. Just they're wines that people know, people love, and they don't necessarily want to surprise over these wines.
It's true. So talking about some of the other wines you make, we're not tasting them today, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the rest of the portfolio and kind of how they fit into what you do.
So the Renaissance series, as I was speaking about, really kind of that classic, that true to varietal, kind of bright, fresh, crisp, aromatic, kind of like a real purity of expression for those wines. I feel like from our site, from all of our sites, as I've longer tenured in the winery, in the cellar, you get to know your sites better and better every year. So I feel like constantly kind of honing in on those styles. Then with the revered wines, we kind of take that focus on our best blocks, and even within our best blocks, our best rows within our best blocks, and keeping those separate, maybe hanging them for a little bit longer just to push that ripeness, really just pushing things a little bit further than I might for a Renaissance wine. Typically smaller production wines, kind of using more new oak, French oak, which I know is another interesting topic in the world of wine, but I personally love oak. So within the revered wines, even within those those specific blocks, those best blocks, going through and then tasting every single barrel and putting together a blend out of those barrels, just to kind of make sure for me that it's the best of the best for those particular wines. And then a new little series that we've had for a few years now, kind of fluctuates with the number of wines in it, is the Small Blessing series. So kind of created to give an outlet for kind of cellar creativity, whether it's half a ton of Giraldago or Legrand or Nebbiolo, Refosco, or even Malbec or Cab Sauv, just kind of something where you can get weird, for lack of a better description. Whether it's winemaking technique wise, we do hand stemming, so no machines, no nothing, just crepes off with your bare hands into clay amphora, clay eggs, spontaneous fermentation, kind of long, 3, 6, 9 month macerations, just really kind of pushing the boundaries on things just to see what they do. There's no textbook on what happens after 9 months on skins. You have no idea. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of push those boundaries a little bit, and kind of, not that I'm not going to keep a Renaissance or revered wine on skins for 9 months, but it is interesting to kind of follow the peaks and the valleys. So it certainly does inform other winemaking decisions, just to kind of know where things will end up. And then there has been for a few years now Small Blessings Malbec, which is just a particular block from the Similkameen, small amount of fruit that just needs to be its own wine.
In terms of the small lots, the Small Blessings, like how many cases are you making of something like that?
Some of them might be 25 cases, and so basically 25 to 75 would be the outside edge. So very limited production wines. I feel like for some of the really small ones, the 25 casers, I'm pretty sure our cellar staff kind of snaps up the majority of those wines. They are, once again, I know that we have done what we had set out to do if those wines are just not for everybody.
Well, I'm curious to see who's crazy enough to be growing grape varieties like Toral de Go and Refosco and Nebbiolo. And I love that you've taken on the challenge of making a wine out of those.
It's there's no, yeah, that's the other interesting thing is there's no barometer for, like, you can't look at your neighbor and say, have you picked your Nebbiolo yet? Because it's the only 2 rows of Nebbiolo or 3 rows of Nebbiolo in the entire valley, I think. So it's yeah, it's a very interesting style. Some of the wines kind of go to Toral de Go, obviously kind of takes you to certain producers in northern Italy, Foradori, stuff like that. The Nebbiolo, you can kind of look at comparables of Alpine Nebbiolo, but it is a really interesting learning experience. And yeah, I don't know why they planted those varietals where they did, but I'm very thankful that they did.
Awesome. And I think it's safe to say that you're going to have to go to the winery to get some of these 25 case or low production wineries. So that's a good incentive if it wasn't already to go and visit. Yes.
Yeah, our gates are open. We're welcoming people from further afield now, thankfully, which is nice. It's the energy is coming back to the valley again, which is great. It's been a long while for everybody, so it's nice to see people out having fun again.
Yeah, I bet. I can't wait to get it up there myself.
Thank you so much, Evan and Lisa. I'm going to cut you off a little bit here because I know there's probably some questions in the background that people are just dying to ask you in our last few minutes while we have you here. So I'm going to turn over to Danielle and see if there's anything we can get going to Evan and Lisa.
So I've been answering a lot of questions as I go. One of the ones was about what wines we produce if we do some single varietals. So I have listed a bunch there already. Lots of great information already been presented from Evan and Lisa today. But if there's any questions and somebody wants to ask directly, I can always unmute. There wasn't anything specific in the chat. Just looking to see one new message that just came up.
Yeah.
Oh, do we have a campsite near and would, as they would love to visit with an RV? I think there is. Wright's Beach is down there.
Mm-hmm. And Okanagan Falls, there's a few options around.
There's a few camping trailers, but I think that I've heard that hotels are hard to find up in the Okanagan, so I'm sure campsites might be a little bit of a tricky thing too.
There is, and if you're particularly crafty, there are pullouts actually along East Side Road where if you're into the more off-grid camping, where camping is allowed, people park there all the time, all summer long. I see campers park there. So there's, depending on how industrious you want to get, that's always an option too.
Yeah, and I will plug too, if you guys haven't had your chance to go to Blasted Church, it's such a beautiful site. We saw in the image at the beginning that red roof kind of log cabin and just the stunning view of Skaha Lake. It's really something special.
It is a beautiful spot. So we have room for a picnic area, buy a bottle of wine, have bring your own lunch. We have charcuterie boxes on site, so kind of all sorts of things. Working on some additional licensing for some other areas to kind of let people sort of wander around site a little bit for a little walkway, just to sort of give people the space to come, be comfortable, have some wine, and kind of see what everything's all about.
Yeah.
Evan, Callie Martin's asking, what is your go-to wine on a day like today?
Go-to wine, I'm Pinot Gris, tough to beat for me. Anything that really bright, aromatic, and kind of that acid profile. Our Sav Sem actually is one of my mainstays, and then kind of on down through. I don't only drink our wine, so looking around the valley to probably a bottle of Tantalus Riesling would be quite nice at this point in time, or of course our OMG sparkling wine on a nice warm day, on a nice cold day, really. Always a good option.
Yeah, that sparkling's pretty tasty. I was going to say sparkling would be my go-to, but that's my go-to on a daily basis. Absolutely. You guys just get those nice refreshing bubbles, and a hot day is fantastic. And we also had a kind of comment about picnic foods. Like, I'm just imagining going getting a baguette, get my Gruyere cheese, a little bit of charcuterie, salami sandwich. Those are great options, I think, for any of these wines that we tasted today. They're great picnic options, great barbecue options. Like we kind of touched on the Big Bang Theory, it's a great summer red for kind of sweet, sticky barbecue sauce on anything that you can grill, for sure.
Yeah.
And Big Bang is such a versatile wine. I mean, it can pair with everything from pizza to steak. It's got a little bit of that Lemberger, adds a little spicy note that goes well with the spicy. It's something that's spicy on pizza or in a pasta. And then that's got a little bit of that tannin that goes nicely with the steaks and the grilled meats.
Mm-hmm. And there's a very cool small lot production that you guys did of the Lemberger, but also known as Blaufränkisch, as a rosé. And we were lucky enough to snag some of it. So if you are in any of your Everything Wine stores, make sure that you grab it, because it's certainly a new release and we're thrilled to have it. I've got a bottle. I'm ready to crack it and give it a try.
They teed it up for me on what I would be drinking on a nice warm day. A nice cold glass of rosé. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, getting thirsty.
That's an exciting wine. It's the first wine that's gone out of my cellar already this year for my my allotment. So it went quickly.
And is this the first year that you've made that Blaufränkisch rosé?
Yes, so it was so important for me to make that name change from Lemberger back to the proper Austrian Blaufränkisch. Yeah, so it was a learning experience, kind of every step of the way. Know the grape quite well by this point in time, having worked with it for so many years. But for making rosé, that was the first time. So quite happy with how those string of decisions turned out.
So there'll be a 2021 version?
There will be a 2021, possibly with a little bit of Refosco in the blend as well. We'll see. Always thinking.
Cool. Sounds like
we do have a question. Sorry, Lisa.
Nope.
We do have a question, and this might be a good one for everybody to know. Is somebody's wondering what wines might be better, cooler or warmer? Sort of a general guide on that.
I mean, what most white wines you want to have kind of fridge temperature. Reds are typically, I mean, this is my WSET coming out, but typically we serve them too warm. We think of room temperature as our go-to, but room temperature is usually 20, 21 degrees. And so we do actually want to chill even our big, bold reds down a few degrees. That really helps bring down the tannins, bring down the alcohol. But a lighter bodied, fresher wine could even be a little bit more chilled. So a Pinot Noir, if, for example, I know that there's one in the portfolio from Blasted Church. Those are great ones to kind of stick in the fridge for a little bit longer. That light, fresh style can certainly handle more of a chill, but I'd put everything in the fridge. I love a little bit of a coolness, because if you think about room temperature, 21 degrees is pretty warm. It's bound to warm up to that anyway. So it's kind of nice to start from 18, 17 degrees, 16 degrees. You don't need to measure it, just maybe 15, 20 minutes. And I think that will serve you well for any reds.
Yeah.
Yeah, those big ones certainly can handle a bit of chill because they are so bold, like a Petit Verdot or Malbec for sure.
Okay, that's great. Well, we've come to our time. I want to thank Evan and Lisa so much for this amazing presentation and taking us through the journey of Blasted Church. I think everyone learned a little bit more about these wines than they did to begin with. And of course, it's a nice way to spend a Thursday evening. So thank you everyone for joining us and giving up your hot sunny day to learn with us. And thank you, Danielle, for helping to organize this. It's been great. If anyone has any further questions about either Everything Wine or Blasted Church, we've got our contact information up there. our social media handles. Please feel free to reach out with anything we can help you with.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your night.
Cheers.
Cheers.